Western civilization is moving closer to a point of irreconcilable, unstable equilibrium, as frighteningly increasing numbers of people trust nothing. Media, academia, and especially the governments are no longer held in high esteem. Regaining trust is often impossible after betrayal. However, transparency is essential to any healing process, and that is the essence of the Don Sullivan Show. Please listen to the team explore, probe, and debate cutting-edge science, technology, and computing. Play ball!
Welcome to a very special episode of the Don Sullivan Show. As you can hear, Don is currently on the road, and you're going to learn more about that very shortly. I'm your co-host, Jersey Steve. First, we want to thank our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by License Fortress, the industry's first and only software asset management firm to offer both a financial and legal guarantee at its highest level of service. Whether it's Oracle, Microsoft, or VMware, License Fortress helps organizations stay compliant, avoid audits, and save money. You can learn more at licensefortress.com. And please support our producer, our wonderful producer, Bill Axt, by visiting axtinc.com. That is AXTINK.com. You can subscribe to his YouTube channel and help support his efforts to create humorous animation, as well as run our website, all while researching a cure for baldness.
Today, the Don Sullivan Show is going to be returning to Yellowstone National Park, one of the truly magnificent natural spectacles in the United States, if not the entire world. So yes, about a month ago, we took you on a full tour as I was backpacking on the Thoroughfare Trail all along the east part of Yellowstone Lake, which is incredibly remote, basically the Serengeti of the United States. And this time we're going to talk a little bit more about those aspects of Yellowstone that are understood, or at least the general public is aware of. Again, as we talked about back in a month ago or so, Yellowstone has so many different aspects to it that will appeal and fascinate any scientific discipline. It's the huge caldera of the world's biggest supervolcano that has erupted 3 times in the last 2 million years. Supervolcanoes are world or humanity-changing events. As we talked about back then, a month ago, the last supervolcano that erupted, the Toba supervolcano, actually ended life, or came close to ending human life on Earth, so much so that the genetics of people on Earth all find themselves being related back to about 200 women around the world who are all our mothers, because that's how many people who lived back 70,000 years ago in those times actually survived the effects of the Toba supervolcano, which is far smaller than the Yellowstone supervolcano, which is, by the way, overdue. So here in Yellowstone, we are going to talk about the supervolcano. We'll talk about the wildlife. We'll talk about the effects of the sulfur pools. It's something, and I'd have to look this up, but around 25% of the world's sulfur-based geysers are actually here in Yellowstone. The amazing fact that there are 8 separate rivers that all flow in different directions, because this is the crown of the continent. When you drive through Yellowstone, you go across the Continental Divide about 6 times. More importantly, from a perspective of high school science, if I was teaching a high school science class, I would explain that there are rivers that go north, the Yellowstone, and east, the Lamar, and west, the Madison, and south the Snake River, either emanating or going through Yellowstone National Park. Again, the first national park in the world, established by President Ulysses S. Grant in 1872 using the Antiquities Act. It wasn't really a national park until the National Park Service, I suppose, under Teddy Roosevelt, but it wasn't any realistic sense. There wasn't a lot of support that President Grant had at the time. In fact, later on, and decades later, they had to send in the military and build military barracks up at the Mammoth Hot Springs area near Gardner in the north part of Yellowstone, specifically to deal with the poachers, because this, as I said, is the Serengeti. There are more grizzly bears per square mile than even in Alaska. It's a bit of a zoo because the animals, the bison, the bears, the elk, and the wolves really can't emigrate out of Yellowstone. It's at least very hard. The wolves don't seem to follow those rules. They've made it all the way out west into Washington. These are the gray wolves that were reintroduced 25 years ago, and they've made it down to Colorado. So yeah, they don't follow anybody's rules, but that's a whole separate show and a separate subject, both politically and scientifically. Tremendously fascinating. The scientific aspect of the wolves has to do with the fact that they have rebalanced the ecosystem of Yellowstone. And in fact, the elk, which were way too prolific back 20 years ago, or 25 years ago when they reintroduced the wolves, were way too comfortable, we'll put it that way. And you see things now like the foliage, the historic growth that occurred along the rivers to have recovered because the elk don't comfortably exist and live on the riverbanks anymore because that makes them too vulnerable to the wolves. So there's been a balance that's returned. It's been a very successful reintroduction overall by, I think, anybody's reasonable assessment. But as I said, we're going to talk about a number of different things. I'm going to climb up Mount Brunson and Mount Washburn over the course of the next couple of days to look out over Yellowstone Canyon and the north part of Yellowstone, and we're going to watch the buffalo herd. We're here at a very special time for the elk. That's the rut where they are in what is their mating season, and we'll talk about, in a tasteful way, how the highly alpha, very strong elk wind up procreating themselves with as many female elk as possible before the winter sets in, and that sets in very fast, and how they literally go crazy during that period. But regardless, as I said, this is an absolutely amazing place in so many different fashions, and we are going to have a series, as I said before, on all the national parks, and a sub-series on Yellowstone itself. So I'm gonna stop blabbing here. I will welcome you all back. I haven't said that yet. I welcome you all back to the Don Sullivan Show, the show where we talk about everything science, technology, and computing. Steve will have his comments early and late, and I will go through the park, both in my car and on foot, and comment all along the way. Comment on the wildlife, comment on the foliage, comment on the 1988 fire, comment on the canyons, comment on the mountains, comment on everything about it. One of the things that I find amazing about the construction of Yellowstone is that the road system is incredibly well thought out. There really isn't, as I said before, a problem at all with traffic in Yellowstone. There is a problem with tourists who stop in the middle of the road to take pictures of deer or elk, and they're not supposed to, and obviously that causes danger. Yellowstone is a huge operation in which the budget of Yellowstone National Park is actually bigger than the budget of the state of Wyoming. We're here at the time when there could be a government shutdown, so we could actually see some services shut down, but not much. Not much overall. There are a lot of people here. Tonight I'll be staying up at the Mammoth Hot Springs Hotel. We will tomorrow morning, and we'll just pick up right there. I'll walk through Mammoth Hot Springs and talk about the unbelievable colors and the tremendous source of energy that comes through the magma hotspot, which is 15 miles. Normally the crust is around 30 miles, and I'm simplifying a little bit, but it's around 15 miles below the surface of Yellowstone, which is, again, the supervolcano, which of course is, like I said, 30,000 years overdue, and that would change the world. I think I talked about last time how I have seen boulders 1,000 miles away the size of pickup trucks in Nebraska that came from the last eruption of the Yellowstone supervolcano. We actually will drive around the caldera line, which is about somewhere in the realm of 100 miles in diameter overall. Yellowstone itself is not as big as some of the national parks in Alaska, but it's about a third the size of New Jersey, so pretty amazing place overall. So again, folks, thanks for listening in, and we're going to have a lot of interesting description of all kinds of cool things. As I said, I take you up a couple of different peaks in Yellowstone, and we go and find some animals, some bison herds, some elk herds, and who knows, maybe we'll even see another couple of bears. As I said last time, when we were east of Yellowstone Lake for the first 3 days, we saw more bear than people. That was a very exhausting little trip for me. But we're back now, and again, in one of the most amazing and wonderful places in the world. So I will sign out for now, but we will be back soon. Tomorrow morning, and we will talk overall about Yellowstone National Park. So see you for now. Hello everyone. Just walking around here in the pitch black darkness at Mammoth Hot Springs, smelling the sulfur up at these massive springs that create these incredible colors that I imagine are the envy of all color design specialists, whether they're in fabric design, on the world's highest fashion levels, or whether they're creating these new colors for watches, the watch dials that we've talked about on the watch series of the Don Sullivan Show. But these are all amazing colors, the whites and the oranges and some reds and some blue hues and so on. The entirety of Mammoth Hot Springs is, I don't know, it's the size of a New York City block. If the buildings, the skyscrapers were all squashed down, walking on the boardwalks through them can get you 2 or 3 miles up and down the stairs. But as we're walking along here, there's hundreds, thousands of elk that live up in this northern area of Yellowstone. And as I said before, this is all mating season. And so they have a lot to say at night, at least the males do. They're out there bugling, it's called. It's a high-pitched whine, and obviously they're looking for girlfriends, many of them, as many as possible. And they're also very agitated if competitive suitors attempt to any kind of an incursion into their space, whatever that might be. In fact, I'm recording this live as I'm walking around up here. Kind of not supposed to be up here because it really is pitch black, but I can hear them. You might be able to hear them over the recording because they are making a lot of noise. And I don't want to go too far up into the boardwalk areas because if one of them sees me, they might decide I'm a competitor and of some kind and want to at least convince me to leave rather abruptly. But I had to walk around up here at night, and I had to tell you all about it because it's so unbelievably cool to actually see all of this. And you can see it every year. It's a September-October thing. And since there's tens of thousands of elk, which are now managed very properly by the inclusion of the wolves that I mentioned before, they are here and put on this show. Sometimes the show gets, shall I say, a little bit more graphic if you wind up seeing them in the right or wrong, depending on your perspective, spot at some individual time. So I'm still here. As I said, it's at night, and I promised you I'd be back in the morning as we hike up Mount Brunson and then possibly down into Grand Prismatic by which is where the other real colors are in the near Old Faithful. We'll go by that as well, and then we'll do some hiking out to some falls in that area as well. So I'll be signing off for tonight, but I had to get this little extra piece in before I completely signed off. See you later. Well, folks, I made it to the top of the Brunson Peak and have these spectacular views of the caldera. I'll try to post a picture, at least the edge of the northern part of the caldera. Mammoth Hot Springs, it's shining in the early morning sun from the white chemicals, mostly sulfur, I think, that dominates its huge presence over the hotel and the entrance into the park. You can see all the way to Yellowstone Canyon, about 40 miles to the south. Well, it's breezy, actually windy up here, so I had to actually get myself to an area that's a little bit blocked so I could actually do some recording. But it's absolutely lovely. And by the way, I was wrong about the colors changing. It is early October, so that shouldn't be happening. And it is. It's just in the undergrowth. The pine trees themselves, of course, never change, but all the other different firs and smaller plants and so on. I think a few aspens here. They're kind of hiding in the midst of the various other foliage, but as you walk through the woods, you can see them changing. So 3 bull elk down at the bottom, obviously looking for potential girlfriends who are hiding at the moment, or at least gathering themselves in an area of protection. As I said, it's very windy, overcast, a little bit of drizzle, but not bad for an October day here in Yellowstone, because in about a month this place freezes. The caldera experiences a tremendous temperature inversion where it gets unbelievably cold in here. I've done many snowmobiling trips in January, February, March, and the cold, especially when you're flying along at 40, 50 miles an hour in a snowmobile, is absolutely incredible. But there is very few sites on Earth that match the steam coming from the hot springs as it freezes and creates a literally infinite number of transparent icicles off the various leafless trees in the February landscape of Yellowstone, near Yellowstone Lake, or in other areas. It's absolutely incredible. Now, I've done it before, and again, I recommend it. everyone else do that whenever they can, or at least come up here during the winter. You don't have to snowmobile. There's other ways to enter the park. In fact, I know the park would rather you come into the park through alternate means. But if you want to snowmobile, you can certainly still do it. Snow machine, as they call it in Alaska, by contacting one of many vendors, none of whom are sponsors of the Don Sullivan Show, but yet it's worth talking about, in West Yellowstone, the town of West Yellowstone, and make arrangements through them. They actually will provide guides, or you can become a guide through taking an online class. In fact, you have to lead a group. That was part of the settlement that allowed snowmobiles, snow machines to stay in Yellowstone. And that's just maybe 10 weeks away before all of that starts. But right now, it's a beautiful, albeit windy and overcast day. It's not going to rain. So I'll get back at you once I get down from this mountain and the wind that you hear in the background has subsided. See you in a bit. Hello everyone, it's in the morning and it's raining, and I'm sitting at the Brunson Peak trailhead with 3 huge elk that are surrounding me. I would think that they were exhausted given all the bugling that went on all night. They actually kept me up loud. I guess I gotta get the message across. I guess we do the same thing. I don't know that I ever bugled to find a girlfriend, but maybe I would have if I had thought of it. We're about to go up Brunson Peak. It's around 50 degrees, and the leaves that are up there that aren't pines are changing, but for the most part, it's still green. This is not a huge mountain like the Fortinas in Colorado, but it has great views of the park down into Mammoth Hot Springs, as we talked about last night, and down into Gardner at the Gardner River, and off to Osprey Falls, and even over to Yellowstone Canyon, which we'll be going to later. So let's start going. I'll comment along the way if we run into anything. There are bears, especially early in the morning, so gotta be a little bit careful. I'll bring bear spray with me. There are not too many hikers. I see a few. Lots and lots of elk. The bison are out in the plains, just kind of hanging out. They don't really come up in the hills this way, or in the mountains at least. And this isn't a volcanic peak, but it's on the edge of the northern part of the caldera. Caldera is amazing in that you can see the actual cliff and the basalt that the pumice over the last 630,000 years from the last eruption has eroded away from. So you can see the basalt in the form of these concentric parallel columns that make up the actual caldera, at least on the northeastern sides. A little bit further down, it goes through Yellowstone Lake, and you really can't see the edge of the caldera. But it's still an amazing thing. We'll try to drop a couple of pictures in the notes for this particular episode. Okay, on the way up. Talk later. Hi again, folks. This is Don back. And here we are down in another area of Yellowstone that I mentioned earlier in this episode called Grand Prismatic. And it truly is grand, and I have to give Yellowstone administration, rangers, some credit. They've built some trails that didn't exist before to go up the hills to experience Grand Prismatic from a high overlook, because it's actually a single hot pool, or a basin is better put it, a geyser basin of hot pools and mud pots and just basically hot water coming from well underneath the ground in a maze of caves. We'll go by Old Faithful, the main geyser later, which is the most dramatic and the most well known. But Grand Prismatic is much more of an area with small oozing, boiling water coming out of the ground, very mineral rich, as everything is in Yellowstone. It obviously gets heated by the close quarters magma from the 15 miles underneath the ground, and the hot spot, which is what fuels the supervolcano. But Grand Prismatic is just an absolute cacophony of colors and just overall beauty that moment to moment, depending on the sunlight, depending on the clouds, depending on other aspects of the weather, looks different. And every time you take a picture of it or anywhere within it, the 10 or 15 acres that really comprise that area, it's just pretty amazing. So every time you come here, you can take a picture and it'll be different, or take many pictures and it'll be different. And now that the trail exists to go to the high overlooks, it's even much more convenient to do so. Of course, stay off it. It's boiling water, or sometimes even hotter, because it's coming up from underneath the ground. It will either kill you or do terrible damage to you, as has happened this year even, if someone falls into it. Every once in a while you see an animal wandering, and it's pretty sad, but it's part of nature. And more importantly, every once in a while you see some tourists decide that they're going to do something clever, usually to be posted on Instagram. I digress for a second, but that's like the 3 steps of true social Darwinism. Do something really stupid and then record it and then post it on Instagram or somewhere else on social media, so to make sure you get in a lot of trouble. But that's happened a couple of times this year as well, and people have gotten hurt very, very badly. So again, if you come to Yellowstone, or you should come to Yellowstone, you definitely want to go around the Grand Prismatic area. As everything here, it's extremely crowded. I'm here in the early fall and it's still crowded. It didn't used to be after Labor Day, but it certainly is now. And as I keep saying, Yellowstone National Park is an absolute playground for scientists of every possible discipline, because everything you could study scientifically happens to be in this 100-mile diameter wonderful location. So let's get back to you when I get over to Old Faithful, or back to the lake where I hiked from about a month ago. So here we are at the Yellowstone Visitor Center, and the massive boardwalk system around all of the geysers in the Old Faithful Basin. So Old Faithful is the world's most renowned geyser for good reasons, because it's old and it's faithful, meaning it's consistent. And we're sitting here right now waiting for it to blow its top, as it does and has for hundreds of years. First discovered by folks from the United States way back in the 1800s. Has always been the main focus here of Yellowstone National Park, and obviously there's so much more, but this is really the most renowned part of it. I'm talking here for a little while because we're a few minutes from the time when it will spout, and it teases you. It starts spouting a little bit, goes up 40 or 50 feet, and then stops. When it goes, you know it goes, but there's even in this early October time frame, there are hundreds of people around sitting on the stools, the benches, all waiting for that moment. It's faithful, but it's not 100% consistent. So over the decades, it's taken a little bit longer to erupt in frequency. When I was a kid, I remember it was somewhere around the 65 minutes, and now it's around every 80 minutes. But even then, there's a bit of inconsistency and unpredictability to it. Of course, the labyrinth of caves in which the hot water flows underneath the surface of Yellowstone, all of the geyser areas which are fed by the heat from the magma spot, the hot spot, shift and change and move around. Sometimes there are hundreds of tiny little earthquakes a day in Yellowstone. Sometimes there are big ones that people can feel. I've never felt one, and I've been here hundreds of times. But sometimes they do. But there are hundreds every day that can be actually recorded. And so the land shifts, the cave shifts, and therefore the water flow shifts, and the pool is somewhere in the couple of 100 feet below the surface of Old Faithful as it fills up to capacity and then explodes, erupts once it reaches that threshold, like a dam bursting, has changed in its size and in the size of the actual spout or the channel in which the water comes up. So it's pretty amazing overall. So we'll be here waiting. At this point, it's somewhere on the 80-minute mark in which the eruptions occur. All day night, all day long, 365 a year. And almost every single time, even in the middle of the night, you see people out here. The actual dining room has, in the Old Faithful Lodge, there's a number of different lodges around here. Not allowed to build anymore. Not sure I've ever agreed with that. I certainly want to see more and more people, mostly the youth, the underprivileged youth of the United States, get to places like this. And between Old Faithful and the Grand Canyon, I'm not sure which is more important, but I absolutely want to see as many people as possible experience these incredible natural phenomena inside the United States. And that's been a theme of the various different episodes of the Don Sullivan Show, that we've taken you to these incredible locations all around the United States. Oh, there's another little spurt. Another little spurt. Not quite. See, it spurts up and then it stops. It's just a tease. I don't know if you could hear it in the background, but so many people were wooing and wahing, but a lot of them are here for the first time, and they don't realize how Old Faithful teases you for a little while. But it shouldn't be more than a minute or so. We're really close to that 80-minute mark. I looked at it. They have back in the visitor center a predictive chalkboard which informs people as to when they think it's actually going to go off or erupt. And I'm just here walking around the sides of the boardwalk, observing the people, particularly the kids, who are sitting in great anticipation. And looks like there it goes. There it goes. It gets to a certain point. Yep, there it is. There it is. And it's going to be a couple of minutes. It's spewing up, I guess about 100 meters. And it's not reached its peak yet. It's not really even close. It'll take about 30 seconds to reach its peak. Enormous amounts of boiling hot water. That's why it's got such a large basin around it, and it's so dangerous to get anywhere off of the boardwalk that's been set up by the Park Service. Because you'll get burned. They get burned by the boiling water, but it's really at its peak now. and it's not stopping, and it will stop soon, but it's blowing itself out, and it's spewing hot boiling sulfur water, which you can, or sulfur injected water, which you can definitely smell. And as you later, and I will do this, walk around again the entire basin, there are hundreds of other smaller glaciers and hot springs and pools and of literally infinite amount of unique colors. But now we're here to observe this phenomenon, one of the most important natural phenomena in the United States, at least in terms of promotion of the National Park Service or creation of the concept of the National Park Service or the national parks on a global basis. This was it. This is what really started it all. And there it goes. All right, it's slowing down just a little bit. Slowing down a little bit, and it will keep going for another minute or so. And then it will go back to be dormant for another 80 minutes until it goes again. People are starting to move away. They want to get their first spots online for lunch, I guess. But as many times as I've been here, and the first time was 1971, it's still pretty amazing to see it. You have that anticipation. You're not 100% sure that it's really going to happen, and then it does. And it never, ever disappoints. So it's really down to about half of its size or half its height now. And in another 30 seconds or so, it'll have completed this cycle. And I'm so glad to have actually gotten here so I can share with the audience of the Don Sullivan Show this incredible scientific phenomena of the combination of this unfathomably destructive magma hotspot that creates the Yellowstone supervolcano, resulting in these, especially Old Faithful, but all of these spots, these places, these phenomena, Grand Prismatic and Old Faithful, as we're here now, of unfathomable beauty and scientific interest. Just absolutely fascinating. And there it goes. It's pretty much done, and everybody is moving away. Some people are deciding to walk around what is really about a 3-mile length of boardwalk to look at all those other pools and hot springs that I mentioned. And I will do the same. So thank you for sharing that moment with me. And again, I've seen it hundreds of times over 5.5 decades, and it still never disappoints. So I'll get back to you in relatively near future for the next Yellowstone phenomena that I happen to run into. See you for now. Well, good morning, my global and loyal audience. The Don Sullivan Show welcomes you back to this wonderful early October morning at the height of Yellowstone National Park as I ascend Washburn Peak, or Mount Washburn. Here I can see everything. I'm just about there. You can see everything down to Yellowstone Canyon. We'll have an entire episode of the Don Sullivan Show on the rivers of Yellowstone, specifically the Yellowstone River and the anomaly of it flowing north and creating the amazing Yellowstone Canyon, which renowned landscape Hudson River School artists created their semi-impressionist 19th century masterpieces on, inspired by, as well as trying to capture some degree of realism. And yes, I am breathing a little bit hard, but this will be the last segment of this entry into the national parks, and specifically Yellowstone National Park series. I haven't run into any bears. There's bear signs all over the place here. I've actually been up this mountain a dozen times or so and never encountered a bear. They come in the early morning mostly, there looking for scrap and stuff that the hikers and tourists dropped and neglected to pick up. But they're not here when there's a lot of people. Usually I run into some mountain goats or bighorn sheep even, sometimes up here. Haven't been up here in a while. It's an amazing place. I mean, you can be walking on 10 foot of snow coming up here on July 4th. And then in November it'll snow again, or middle of October. But I'm in early October when I'm recording this episode, and there really isn't much going on. Not many people on the trail, which wasn't the case in some other places I've been. It's amazing that these national parks, after Labor Day, are as crowded as they are. But I wanted to fill out this episode and this segment of the episode by talking about how magnificent, again, this national park is in particular, encouraging you to come, encouraging you to support efforts to get every youngster, every kid, especially the less fortunate in the inner cities, to experience the national parks and Yellowstone and the Grand Canyon in particular. Speaking of the Grand Canyon, I will be hiking there in a few weeks, so I'll do another episode there. We'll be going up and down, not quite to the river, but we'll be going up and down there. So we'll see you back at that time. But for now, I'm going to try to beat the pending rain and get off the peak, which is always windy. That's why I've actually done this segment just before I've reached the peak. It's always really windy up there and hard to record. But thank you again for listening. And remember, always remember, that especially in these times of the baseball playoffs, and even on the highest peak in Yellowstone National Park, that all, and I mean all, at-bats are situational.